Hey everyone, Firegross here, and today we're going to be talking about how I made 2 mirrors in 3 days by farming Scourge maps. My strategy revolved around collecting data to figure out the exact profitability of each reward type in Scourge maps, and then to put together a weighted sum search that would allow me to quickly acquire all of the best and most profitable Scourge maps. Over the 3 days that I farmed this strategy, I put about 36 hours worth of gameplay into it. Now this includes all the trading time both to acquire the Scourge maps and also to liquidate all the currency, and it works out to approximately 8 exalts worth of profit per hour. I totaled around 290 exalts. I bought my first mirror for 140x and my second mirror for 147x, only having 3x left over at the end. I'm going to be providing a complete breakdown of this strategy, including how I arrived at certain conclusions starting out, how I farmed it, and then how you can take it even further than what I did. I didn't use any watchstones for this strategy, and using watchstones adds about 50% value to all the splinter-based rewards. Now, that does require a starting investment of about 15x, which was kind of why I didn't do it, because it was going to be a lot harder to recommend it to other people. This strategy pretty much relies upon a weighted sum search, as I discussed previously, and we're going to get more into that later on in the video, but I'm going to talk a bit about how I arrived at these weights exactly, since they're not just random numbers I plucked out of the air. To start off with, I had to divide the reward types up into 3 categories. The first one were reward types I didn't care about, and reward types which probably were worth absolutely nothing, and so I wasn't going to get a whole bunch of data on them because they just weren't worth the time. And then of the remaining 2, I needed to have a category of rewards which I could just throw into a dump tab and analyze later, and then a second category for reward types which I had to monitor very closely and track data for, after each individual run. And just to sort of explain to you the difference between those two, if you were to look at something like tainted currencies, every tainted currency reward drops exactly 1 tainted currency per rare, which means you can just chuck all your tainted currencies into a dump tab at the end, and then say you have 200, you killed 200 rares, and then you can just sort of work out the value of them by averaging out, like the total value of all your tainted currencies divided by, say, 200. On the other hand, you had things like basic currency, and basic currency required me tracking how many rares I got per map versus how many basic currencies were dropping per rare in that map, and then also making sure not to pick up other basic currencies along the way so that it didn't inflate my data or give me incorrect readings and stuff like that. This spreadsheet will be included in the description below the video, as all of my spreadsheets are, and you can kind of go through it in your own time and draw whatever conclusions you want to, or you can make a copy and go and edit the data in here, if you want. That's totally fine, and I would even encourage it if you wanted to do the strat, because I gathered all this data within 1 day. It would have probably been a lot better off if I had a week to gather the data and I crowdsourced some of the data and, got input from other people. But the reality is that once I had the idea for the strat, I kind of just wanted to get straight to doing the strat, which meant I set aside 1 day for gathering the data and then the other 3 days for actually executing the strat. So you can kind of see in all the tabs down here how we arrived at our values for each type of reward. I'm going to go through them real quick. So stack decks are quite simply worth 1.5 in bulk, and that's just that. For scarabs, we're going to assume that there is a weighting on the tier of the scarabs. Like gildeds obviously drop 10% of the time, whereas rusteds are dropping close to 60% of the time. Now this was based on my own data, but again, if you want more accurate data, go do this yourself and drop more scarabs and then figure it out based on your own data. As for the types of scarabs, we're going to just assume they're all equally weighted. Now that could be totally incorrect, but I don't have any information that says otherwise, so we're just going to go with that. We're kind of going to average out the prices based on all this, and then, we get our average amount, our average value per scarab, rather, which is over here. For Catalyst, we're kind of going off my own data here. It's entirely possible that these scarabs here that I'm hovering my mouse over are weighted equally, but they didn't drop equally, so we're just going to go with what I have there. For reroll currencies, same thing. I assume they are weighted. There does seem to be this like a 45, 15, 20, 20 distribution going on, but I can't confirm it either way, so we're just going to go off what I have. Same thing with tainted currencies. Basic currencies. Now, basic currencies are a little more complicated since a whole bunch of basic currencies didn't show up on my filter, and the other thing to keep in mind is that basic currencies are affected by the tier of the map. I don't know to what extent, though. It is pretty obvious that when you're running red maps, you're actually dropping awakened sextants from the basic currency reward, whereas you're not doing that when you're dropping white tier maps. So the value of this one does sort of fluctuate a little bit. I just ran a whole bunch of maps of different tiers and took like the average value from the tab versus the amount of basic currency rewards that I dropped per rare. So, but again, do this yourself, and if you want to update the value of this further, be my guest. Oils ended up being pretty low value. Now, when I actually did the strat for real, I ended up dropping 1 crimson and 1 black, but during the initial testing I didn't, and so The blight oils came out a little low, but I think even if I were to include like a crimson and a black oil in here, the prices weren't going to be that much higher. You know, this is a very underwhelming reward type. Now, breach, same deal. I think these are actually fairly underwhelming compared to what a lot of people are giving them credit for, and the prices are dropping every day. You know, like these prices were from a few days ago, and it's almost certainly lower now. Legion, now this is obviously going to be carried by, you know, I think you can buff the value of this by an additional 40% with Watchstones, but we're not using Watchstones, so if you want to do it, you can do it, and then you just increase the value per stack. You know, nothing interesting going on here. I'm just going to skip to the end and talk about a few things towards the end here that are worth talking about. Maps. Now, the value of maps really depends on what you're doing with your maps. A lot of people just don't sell their maps, and the people that are selling their maps, you're probably not going to be running a lot of tier 14 plus Scourge maps using this strategy, since a lot of the ones that come up in the filter are white maps. You don't have a lot of choice here. If you want to assign value to this and interact with it differently to what I did, be my guest, but I just valued maps as being worth like 1 or even 0 in some cases. They're just not worth that much when you're running them with Scourge maps, unfortunately. It does seem a little like, it does seem crazy when you're dropping like 30 tier 14 plus in some situations, but most of the time that's not happening with this reward type, and most of the time you're dropping junk, basically, and we're going to treat it as junk. If you do it in a way that's not junk, then you can change the value of it, but I'm going to leave it totally up to you. And also remember, when it's dropping tier 14 plus maps, if you're not selling your tier 14 plus maps, those maps don't have any value to you, really. It's not that map sustain costs anything at the moment. Map sustain is pretty much free, so if you're already over-sustaining your maps and then you get more maps, that's worth big fat 0 to you, so just keep that in mind. Gem rewards, now, this is a little tricky. You do drop a lot of level 19, level 20, level 21 gems in some cases, but not a lot of them sell, especially since the 21 gems don't have quality, and, you know, they don't always drop for gems that are high in demand or anything like that. So some of the level 21 gems did sell, and that was cool, but most of them didn't. Pretty much all of the level 19 and 20 gems didn't sell either, and this is pretty much just coming down to the GCP value over here, and I estimated that you're getting like 3C worth of GCPs every 10 rares on average. You know, that was just a guesstimation, basically. I didn't actually track data very closely for this one, since I didn't think it was really worth it. I didn't drop any empowers, enlightens, or enhances during my testing, but while I was running the actual strategy in the course of farming my 2 mirrors, I did drop 1 empower. Take from that what you will. I would say I dropped, you know, thousands upon thousands of gem rewards. The chances of getting an empower or enlighten are very, very low, so I wouldn't really, you know, add value to this reward type based on that. Now, the fractures and the plus ones, there's a lot to unpack here, but I will just say, for the most part, it's absolute garbage. It's absolute hot garbage. I've heard a lot of people saying the fractured ones are just absolutely insane, and that they're making tons of money from this. I really have to doubt that. I dropped thousands of fractured items, and I identified maybe a few hundred of them. My best fractured item was worth 20C, and the thing is that even if hypothetically there are some that are worth a lot of money, it's a lot of micromanaging. You know, you have to pick the item up, you have to ID it, then you have to drop it back on the floor. Since these are big items, they're going to fill up your inventory really quick, and you just can't afford to fill up your inventory and make multiple trips back and forth, because you're trying to run these maps as fast as possible, right? You want to be running these in like 3-4 minutes each, and when you're dealing with fractured items, there were some maps I was, you know, spending upwards of 10 minutes trying to figure out whether the fractured items were worth it, and I just gave up very quickly, because I was like, you know, this is just straight up costing me money trying to ID these, right? Like, fractured items, if you interact with this reward mechanic, you are straight up removing money from your stash pretty much, right? You're just getting through the Scourge maps a lot slower. It's not worth it. It's absolute hot garbage. Don't do it, right? Yeah, that's all there is to say there. Now, as for the plus ones, a lot of people have been saying that the plus ones are worth a lot of money. In some cases, maybe they are, right? I think if you combine the plus ones with influence items, they can be good, because then you could be dropping item level 86 influence spaces, and that can be worth a lot of money in some cases, but this late into the league, a lot of them are probably like 5C tops, and those are for the good bases. For the bad bases, they're probably absolutely worthless. So, you know, this is something you can explore if you want. I didn't, and for me, it was just worth absolutely nothing, so I'm just treating it as being worth 0. Abyss rewards, same deal. I don't think I saw a single Stygian Vice in any of the rewards. I don't know whether it's possible for Stygian Vice to drop or if it's like super rare or whatever. It appeared to just be Abyssal Jewels. Actually, no, I think the reward type says Abyssal Jewels, come to think of it. And they're all terrible, right? You can pick them up if you want. You can ID them. I had a quad tab going. I filled the quad tab up about halfway. I had the quad tab priced at, I think, 20C and like 2 gems sold. In the end, I just stopped picking them up because I determined that it wasn't really worth my time. Influence items, so I talked about this already. Yeah, kind of garbage. Oh, Scourge items, I didn't talk about this. Yeah, Scourge items are absolutely garbage. Don't do them. Not worth money. And uniques. So uniques are kind of the same deal. Yeah, there are going to be some uniques that are worth money, but they're going to pop up on your filter and you'll know about it when it happens. But for the most part, I wouldn't go out of my way to pursue unique rewards. I did get a lot of unique rewards as a like second or a third reward type on the Scourge maps I was running. Now, even though I wasn't going out of my way to get them, I was still, ending up with this reward type quite often. And so I was getting tons and tons and tons of uniques, over the course of all the farming. I farmed 2 mirrors worth and I think the best, I dropped like 2 cold iron points maybe and I think a Wind Ripper, but at the same time, I'm not sure that the Wind Ripper dropped in the pile dropped by the rare. I think it may have dropped near the rare and just been a separate drop. I'm not sure. But yeah, this reward type is absolutely trash. I'm even leaning towards thinking it might be weighted away from giving you a good reward type because the more I think about it, dropping this many uniques could be a little strong. So they may have weighted it towards bad reward types, to prevent you from farming chase uniques too fast with this sort of thing. So yeah, I just don't rate this one at all. One final thing I will say on the topic of weightings is that the weightings here are only looking at reward type. They're not looking at all the other factors that go into these maps and the profitability of these maps. So for example, random shifting makes your maps take a lot longer to complete. Manual shifting gives you a lot of extra rares, and then there are certain layouts that are just better than others. So everyone knows Haunted Mansion tends to be better on average than a lot of other maps. On top of that, maps that are pretty much scoured and don't have map mods on them, no pack size and stuff like that, they seem to give less rares than, maps that were alked. So there are a whole lot of things to take into consideration here, and this weighted sum search is only to give you a rough idea of what maps you want to start checking out. It's not an indication of the exact profitability of each map. How does this work in action? Well, quite simply, you're going to take the trade link that I've provided you, the one with the weighted sum search, and it's going to filter for a sum of 30 and a max Chaos Orb value of 30C. Now, you can change those if you want once you become more comfortable with what you're doing, but that's what we're running with at the time. And we're also filtering out take physics damage when you shift in or out of Nightmare up to 9,000. Now, if you're running a high armor build, you can straight up get rid of this, and if you're running a build that has a lot of regen, you can also get rid of this line here that says you're going to be losing more than 900 life per second while in Nightmare. But, that just depends on you, and you can also add things depending on what you want. So, okay, we're going to hit search, and we're going to get all the cheapest maps that show up in this search. So this one here, most of its value is coming from the 2 stacks of Expedition currency. Now, Expedition currency is just rerolls that we're dropping per rare. It's worth 5C. I'd have a hard time believing this map is not going to turn, a decent profit. If you think it like 10 rares, that's 20 rerolls basically, and I believe Astragalis are worth 1C, and the Tujan coins are worth like 4 or 5C at the moment, so you could easily pay this map off just with the first rare. This is a very easy profit, and it's a tier 3 map, which means you're going to have absolutely no trouble running it. There aren't any particularly dangerous mods here, and yeah, basically you're just going to continue down this list. You're going to buy up all the maps, up until a certain point where you feel like maybe it's not as worth it and the profit margins are getting tighter. And then what you're going to do is you're going to sort by sum. You're just going to click the sum line here, and then it's going to sort all of the maps that show up in your filter according to sum. And so now you're going to have basically maps that have perhaps not as large a margin of profit, but they will have higher currency per map, basically, or higher currency per hour. So this one you're getting 5 tainted currencies per rare and 2 simulacrum splinters per rare. I guess the essences are also worth something, but they're not that big of a deal. We have manual shifting here, which means we're going to get extra rares. We have delirium rewards, which means extra simulacrum splinters and extra juice for the tank, which is going to make it easier to finish the map off. It's only worth 30C. This is going to be easy profit, and as you can see, the sum is 105. This map's worth quite a lot. Okay, so this would be an instant buy. This would probably be an instant buy. We're getting 4 stacks of Legion Splinters, 3, Expedition rerolls per rare. Another easy purchase. Now, you do have to pay attention to these lines, because some of them are bricks, right? Take 9,000 phys damage when you shift in or out of Nightmare. you're going to have a specialized build for this, right? You want to be running armor, determination, granite flasks, and if it is a manual shift, right? So like this is triggered. If you are doing a manual shift, you can use tools such as Enduring Composure or Mortal Call. But yeah, so maybe that one, if your build can't handle it, maybe you give this one a miss. But this one, you'll definitely be able to do. 9,000 lightning damage, you're mitigating that by 75% just by having lightning res at the cap of 75%. So this isn't really a big deal, and there's nothing here that's particularly threatening. It's a tier 4 map. You're getting 1 scarab, 1 fossil, and 4 additional tainted currency items. It's only costing 30 C. This is an instant buy. There's nothing here that would dissuade you from making this purchase. Now, as good as a currency strategy is, it's worthless if you are not optimizing it and you're not trying to, squeeze in as many gameplay hours and you're trying to min-max all your trading and liquidating and all that sort of stuff. And so I'm providing a breakdown on my schedule here, partially because I don't want people thinking this is just free currency that they're going to play 4 hours a day and then get rich, and also because I want people to understand the kind of work that goes into something like this and how you have to think ahead a little bit in order to make it all work and flow smoothly. So basically we were doing roughly 12-hour days, and we were doing 3 of them. And so I was also breaking this into 4-hour sessions, mainly because my sleep was kind of all over the place. I had, in some cases, to deal with work between the sessions. In some cases, I wanted to eat, watch TV, or nap in some cases. So I would start off by doing 30 minutes worth of trading at the start. Now, this would basically be liquidating the things that were easy to liquidate from the last lot of things. So stack decks go for 1.5C in bulk, and after every session, you're going to have a nice bulk of them. You're going to easily have a few hundred to get rid of. In some cases, they're like tainted chromes, tainted fusings. Fossils are another really good one, so you can kind of get bulk prices pretty quickly if you're doing fossil rewards. You don't have to wait for the full 3 days to be up and stuff like that. Essences are things I would have, they're not the kinds of things I'd be liquidating in these 30-minute sessions, obviously because essences take a lot longer to liquidate, you don't get the sales straight away, and also having a really large amount of bulk is going to increase your chances of being able to sell them at the price you want to sell them. So, and then while we're doing this like little bit of liquidating, we're using the money that's coming in to then buy additional maps. And I would aim to get about 50 maps to run for the next 3.5 to 4 hours, depending on the thing. And so it was like, selling and buying, but it's very easy to get 50 maps doing this, and all the money that's coming in, you can easily fund the maps and then some. And yeah, so after about 30 minutes worth of trading, we do 3.5 hours worth of farming. Now, in some cases, obviously, the sessions were more or less. These are just an approximation. Obviously, I didn't include I didn't make a diary, is what I'm saying. This is just me sort of describing it after the fact so that you have an understanding of the breakdown of the day. And then on the final day, I did about 1 hour worth of liquidation. And then I watched the League of Legends World Finals after that 1 hour of liquidation. And so there were some straggler trades that sort of came in later on. There were some essences I hadn't fully liquidated, stuff like that. That was sort of made over the next few hours while I was just sort of chilling out, not really paying attention to the game. You can sort of count this however you want. I don't really count this as, time played, since I was doing something else completely and just not paying attention to the game. There were maybe like 5 or 6 trades made during that time, so it's kind of what it is. Juicing these maps is an oddly controversial topic at the moment, and merely because it seems that certain types of juice actually reduce the amount of rares you get in the map. Based on my experience, there is just a high amount of variance on the amount of rares in a map. I know some people are running a few maps and they're saying oh, I ran Ambush Scarabs and I only got 3 rares, in all the maps I ran. It could very well be that there is a correlation between these types of juice and getting less rares. It could very well be the case that, like spawning a Blight or spawning a Legion or even a Strongbox in a certain spot, takes up the spot of where a rare would have naturally spawned and basically deletes it, and so you don't get to interact with that rare pack anymore. I don't know. I really don't know. But I thought I went for a sort of safe approach to it. And so I added 4 simple sextants onto each map. Now, the reason we're using simple sextants is because the Nemesis farming is driving up the price of awakened sextants. And I had lots of simple sextants lying around, so it didn't cost me very much to put some extra juice onto the map. Now, whether sextants affect rares or not is kind of immaterial. The sextants are sort of there to provide some extra juice to fill up the bar a little quicker, and so that, when you're doing the shift on rare, for example, you have some extra juice to clear your map. We're doing a Rusted Metamorph Scarab mainly because I'm very, very confident this doesn't consume the spot of any rare monsters, but it does mean you get a free tank of juice at the end of your map. And this is really useful. If you've made a mistake somewhere along the map, or there's an entire section of the map which you haven't been able to clear while you're in the nightmare, you could just spawn Tane in that area and kill your Metamorph and then get a full tank of juice. And this is really, really, really helpful for not just making sure you fully clear the map if you've made mistakes, but it also allows you to clear the map more efficiently because you can sort of plan that, okay, this section I'm going to do with Tane and the rest of the map I'm going to do without Tane. Stuff like that. I also added Shaper and Elder Scarabs in just for the same reason I put the Sextants in, for some extra juice, extra mobs to kill, that sort of thing. I don't think I picked up a single influence base of these, so... But, these are really cheap. I was buying them in bulk really cheap, so it was kind of a no-brainer to run these. I also had incubators constantly running. Even though I wasn't going after incubator rewards, they were still showing up on all of the maps that I ended up running. So I ended up with like quad tabs worth of incubators for no reason whatsoever. And yeah, basically just making sure incubators are constantly running at all times is going to increase your profit per hour. Now, yeah, other juice, does it equal bad? I don't know. Maybe. I did some testing, and it appeared that maybe it did. I don't know, and I'm going to let other people figure that out, on their own. Now we're going to talk a little bit about how to optimize the strat, and this is really important because when you're putting 36 hours worth of gameplay into a strategy, you really need to make sure that every minute is spent as efficiently as possible. Part of why I was able to make 2 mirrors in 3 days is because I played a build that, was fairly optimized for this sort of content. There are builds that are probably even better, right? There are probably people out there that could have made the 2 mirrors in 2 days, even, potentially. I don't know exactly, but it's entirely possible. So there are some things I'm going to talk about initially, and that is the Scourge mods. You do have to pay attention to these things. Random shifting maps means that you're going to clear the map slower, because you're going to clear a bit of the nightmare, and then you're going to come back out, and then you have to wait until you go back in. There's no way you can trigger it. Having extra rares in the base map isn't going to make you go back in faster or anything like that. You just have to wait around, right? But it is important when you're doing random shift to sort of position yourself where you want to shift in. Don't necessarily keep running ahead and trying to clear the base map. The base map is virtually worthless. If you're looking at the fact that you're getting potentially 100 C per map from all of the Scourge rewards, who cares about the base map, right? The base map is maybe worth 5C fully cleared, so don't care about it pretty much most of the time, especially on the low tiers. Just position yourself where you want to be when you go back into the Nightmare. That's going to save as much time as possible, and, if you can afford to avoid random shifting ones, just avoid them. Now, manual shift is more res. I talked about this a little bit earlier. I think Grimmer's talked a bit about it, but basically, going in more frequently generates additional rare packs on occasion, and we don't know why. It's just extra rares, extra rewards. It's hard to go wrong here. If you end up with a full tank of juice at the end of the base map, what you can do is you can just spend it, kill a rare pack, and then shift back out. Spend it, kill a rare pack, shift back out, go kill the boss, go back into the Nightmare, kill a rare pack, pop Tane, kill a rare pack, go back out, etc., right? This is very highly abusable, and there have been some situations where after finishing the map, I've generated an additional 5 rares. Absolutely busted. Whenever you see a manual shift one, you can pay a little bit extra for it, or you want to prioritize buying it before someone else does. And then the last thing is the Fizz damage shift. So I think all the elemental damage shifts are really easy to deal with, and especially when they get really high. If you're running Mage Blood Plus, for example, you can literally run any elemental damage mod and you don't care, because you're just mitigating the hell out of that damage. It does nothing to you. For the Fizz damage shift is a little different, right? So I tend to only go up to 9k, but what you can do if you're not playing an armor class is to run Iron Reflexes on a spare chest. So I'm playing Tornado Shot Occultist, and we use Dendrobate, and there aren't any Dendrobates with Iron Reflexes, so I bought myself like a 3C Iron Reflex body armor, and I basically just, every time I buy up a bunch of maps, I put aside all the Fizz damage shift ones, and then I run them all together. I run Iron Reflexes on this body armor. It does lower my damage a little bit, but that doesn't matter. I run a Granite Flask with Mage Blood, so that's some extra base armor, and then I run both Grace and Determination. And this gives me like I think like 29k armor overall, or maybe it's a little, maybe I'm misremembering, maybe it's even more. And so having all this means I can soak these 9k damage hits. If it is a manual shift one, you can use Molten Shell with this setup, or even in non-armor setups, you can use Immortal Call and consume endurance charges for 75% Fizz damage reduction. I've heard a lot of things about people saying that the physical damage shift ignores damage reduction. That's not true. I've tested it out, and all of the forms of damage reduction that I was testing, whether it was Immortal Call, soaking it with shields such as Steel Skin or Molten Shell, and also using armor, all of these things all worked for it. And so basically playing an evasion build and using the Iron Reflexes trick, I was able to do these 9k damage shifts without too much trouble. In a lot of cases, they weren't really taking, there were some situations where I wasn't even losing half my life, and especially the manual shift ones, it was very easy. But just have potentially a gear swap ready if you have to, or, if you really can't run these maps, just avoid them. I'm just going to wrap this up with a few topics that kind of weren't covered in enough detail earlier on. So running an optimal loot filter, you want to be looting as you run for the most part. I mean, not always, but in some situations where you're up in a dead end, you want to be able to quickly, loot the things that you're dropping, especially if the bar is about to run out, right? You need to be able to click things as soon as possible. It's going to save you valuable seconds. It's going to make your chaos per hour go up. So I would spend the time getting a good loot filter, and I've included mine in the description below if you want to use that. If you don't feel comfortable with it, just make your own. But if you're farming this for any decent period of time, a good loot filter is an absolute must, right? More so for this strategy than a lot of other strategies, because not being able to loot as you run is going to actually slow you down a very significant amount. And I started off without an optimized loot filter, and once I switched, I noticed I was getting through these maps a hell of a lot faster. Now, watchstones equal more loot. Grimmer's talked about this a lot, but basically the Breach, Legion, and Simulacrum rewards, you can get 40 to 50% extra splinters if you run corresponding watchstones that either give you a full Breach or a full Legion emblem, by, a small chance to, get a full Breach stone or a Legion emblem when you pick up a stack of splinters, and then the Simulacrum one just gives you, I think, up to 50% increased size of the stack. This is very expensive. You need 48 watchstones to cover all 3 types in all 4 regions, I believe, right? Is my math correct on that? So I think it's 16 per type. No. Yeah, 48. You need 48 all up. That's very expensive, right? You're looking at like 40x investment, so I would invest in the watchstones if you want to farm Scourge maps for the next, say, month. But if you're only looking to farm it for the next week, probably don't do the watchstones, right? There's also a lot of extra micromanaging that's going to go on where you're running a splinter reward on your next map, and you got to start fiddling around with watchstones. That's going to potentially become annoying, and it's going to cut into your loot per hour, right? You're going to have an extra tab with an assortment of watchstones, and when you're done with them, you're going to have to put them back in the right places so that you can visually filter them out next time you use them. It is 40 to 50% more rewards per map. I don't know that it's like 40 to 50% more splinter rewards per hour necessarily, because you are investing extra time in micromanaging all these things. So do it if it's really important to you, but yeah, it's absolutely fine if you don't run them, is the bottom line. Okay, loot as you run. I have actually talked about this quite a bit, but basically when you're going up a dead end in the Nightmare, if you loot the items that you drop while you're up there, then you don't have to return there in the base map. And that's really important, because if you don't need to, you're basically able to finish the map faster. So yeah, just loot as you run if you're in an area which you don't want to return to, right? This doesn't mean always loot as you run. If you just shift into the Nightmare and you drop a bunch of loot right near where you spawn back, you can ignore it, because once you shift out of the Nightmare, then you can pick it up and you don't have to waste your juice. But if you're far from the initial spawn point, or the initial point where you shifted into the Nightmare, yeah, probably loot as you run is a really good idea. I know a lot of people are advising people not to do this, but there are definitely a lot of situations, like almost every map, where you want to be able to loot as you run. It's very important it's very important to identify which situations you do want to loot as you run, and then also to have the capability to do so. So you need to have a build that's like automating damage as you run, so that you can loot, without getting killed. You also want to have a good loot filter, as we discussed, yeah, all that sort of stuff, right? Very important. And then finally, don't finish the base maps. If you kill all the rares in the Nightmare, and you can see that the Nightmare map is completely filled out, and you've traversed it all, and you've killed all the rares, when you then leave the Nightmare, and you run to the boss room to kill the boss, you're losing money. Your chaos per hour is just going down. So what I would recommend is, instead of killing the boss, you may as well just go back to town, take 10 chaos orbs out of your stash, and delete them. Because that's effectively, that's what you're doing, right? Part of why this strategy is so good is because we're running 8 exalts per hour on average in terms of profit, right? You're busting out sometimes upwards of 1 exalt profit per map. It's an insane amount of money per hour, but the thing is, this money is focused in the Scourge rewards. It's not you don't really care about the map boss loot. Like, what's the best thing a map boss can drop? Okay, very, very small chance for it to drop a Cortex, and I mean a very, very small chance for it to drop a Cortex. You can do it if you really want, but I really wouldn't recommend it. Once I figured out that the base map wasn't worth it, I basically stopped doing it, and the chaos per hour went up. It was 8x on average over the time that I did it, But if I had only taken the amount of money I was making per hour in the last day, I would say it would be closer to like 9 or 10x per average. I had fully optimized this strat by the third day, and, you know, definitely not on the first day. On the first day, there was still a lot of learning, and I was still finishing the base maps. Especially if you're running white or yellow maps, or anything below tier 14, there is literally zero reason to finish the rest of the map. Once you're done with the nightmare, get the hell out of that map and put the next map in. If you enjoyed this video, give me a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.